This Sunday on Capital Connection, what is the state of the state in Illinois after 1 year under Governor Pritzker? The state of the state in Illinois in one word.
Challenging.
Improving.
Optimistic.
Stagnant.
Decline.
Trite.
The governor rebukes his critics and offers to work across the aisle with Republicans to solve some of the state's biggest fiscal problems. And
I told the governor that he is a willing partner in the House Republicans and me to accomplish these goals. It really is now up to the Speaker of the House to see whether or not he shares the governor's same attitude of working in a collaborative manner to finally fix the biggest problems that we have facing the state of Illinois.
A former state senator pleads guilty in federal court to bribery and tax evasion. What's coming next in the crackdown on corruption? Plus, new reports indicate the errors in the state's automatic voter registration rollout are greater than we first knew. Why 16-year-olds were almost signed up to vote as underage voters. And joining us on our Reporters Roundtable, John O'Connor from the Associated Press and Hannah Meisel from the Daily Line. It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Mark Maxwell is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell reporting from the Illinois State House on this Sunday, February 2nd. This week, we saw Governor Pritzker deliver his State of the State address and promise a crackdown on corruption. This coming just 48 hours, roughly, after federal prosecutors not only charged, but got a guilty plea from former State Senator Martin Sandoval, who was accused of and admitted to accepting nearly $250,000 in bribes and evading his taxes.
As you know, former Illinois State Senator Martin Sandoval pleaded guilty earlier today to bribery and to a tax offense. As part of that plea agreement, Mr. Sandoval has agreed to fully and truthfully cooperate with the government, with the U.S. Attorney's Office in any matter that we ask him to cooperate on.
Restoring the public's trust is of paramount importance. Let's not let the well-connected and the well-protected work the system while the interests of ordinary citizens are forgotten. There is too much that needs to be accomplished to lift up all of the people of Illinois.
I think that everything that you hear is third hand. There's a lot of whispers that go around this building. We've heard that for years. But when Sandoval's office was hit with the search warrant, I think most people said, but why did it take that long?
What he did was disgusting and just disheartening for not just myself in this position as a former representative, but as a constituent of the district. And so what I'm trying to do is to make sure to let the folks know in my district and in the state of Illinois that today is a brand new day.
So as set forth in the plea agreement, the maximum sentence under the law, the maximum statute is 13 years. As you know, set forth in the plea agreement as well, his sentencing guideline range is 121 to 151 months, I believe it is. And, you know, in return for the cooperation as set forth in the plea agreement, what the government has agreed to do, if there is full and truthful cooperation on any matter we ask him to cooperate on, we would make a recommendation that would be below the 121 months.
We turn now to our Reporters Roundtable for insight and analysis on this top news of the week. Joining us now is John O'Connor from the Associated Press and Hannah Meisel from the Daily Line. Good to have you both with us.
Glad to be here.
First takeaways from what we saw in those charging documents, what Senator Sandoval has now admitted to doing with $250,000 roughly of bribes. They really only spelled out a fraction of those by detail. It seems to indicate that this could lead in many different directions, even still.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we saw in the fall when the search warrant for his Springfield office was released, there was a very, very, very long list of names and companies and, you know, individual A, cooperating witness 2, things like that. And so, you know, now that we know that he has been cooperating with the FBI, he pleaded guilty to only 2 counts. When, you know, conceivably he could have been charged with a lot more. You know, we're going to see this play out for a very long time.
Hannah, you had an interesting tidbit about his cooperation.
Right. So I was told several months ago, and wasn't able to report it until this week, that Sandoval had been spotted multiple times being dropped off by a family member at a Chicago Dunkin' Donuts and then being picked up by presumably the feds, and then being dropped off hours later again at that same Dunkin' Donuts and being driven home by his daughter. And
so if were this in a movie script, it'd be something like he's singing like a bird to the feds right now.
Or somebody spending a lot of time in a Dunkin' Donuts.
Sure.
I guess that's an iconic place to go meet law enforcement. But John, as you look at this case, or as you listen to Governor Pritzker's comments from the lectern as he gave his State of the State, he's talking tough on corruption right now. Some of his critics, they're like, well, look, it's the low-hanging fruit. He almost has to address this right now. What should we take away from all of this public posturing from both sides on the crackdown on corruption?
There has to be something done, and there will be something substantive done this spring. In fact, one of the major things he talked about was a ban on the revolving door, this idea that legislators in many states, when you leave the legislature, there's a cooling off period of a year or more before you can become a lobbyist. Here in Illinois, you can resign the legislature today and lobby your friends, your former colleagues tomorrow on an issue. But I've been asking this question of lawmakers, the leaders, some of the, longtime legislators all week. This is, to a taxpayer, this is the same old song, and they just shake their heads. Yeah, we know, and we just got to get on top of it. And they understand that you put in law A, they're going to find, loophole B to break it. But
that's kind of what Speaker Madigan said in his response, right? He said, look, bad actors are always going to find a way to corrupt the system, but we're going to commit to prosecute all of this. That's what he put out sort of in a statement. I'm paraphrasing him here. But Hannah, I don't know if you were one of many in the audience who might have been gauging Speaker Madigan's body language or reaction as Governor Pritzker is saying things like utility companies will no longer write energy legislation in this building. That's a direct reference to ComEd and Exelon, the company that hired many of Speaker Madigan's former political allies to become lobbyists. Right. And he also said, in addition to all that we can no longer just sit idly by and watch all this happen in this culture of corruption. So even if he wasn't directly referencing the speaker by name, you don't have to read too far into it to see that he's talking about the people that have presided over this culture of corruption in Springfield.
Right, and it was not just that. The governor made a lot of, he talked a lot about how he has been emphasizing diversity in his appointments, and the backstory there is that the governor's office has gotten a lot of pressure to pick, to
put the right person in the right spot.
Yes, exactly.
Here's my guy.
Right. And, that has been traditionally white men. And, that's how the Chicago machine had, worked for decades. And, the governor said the old patronage system has to die finally and completely. And the speaker, it's no doubt that he came up out of that and that he gained power from that, and that's how he has maintained his power for so many years.
John, are there enough signs for you right now to say that there is some sort of conflict or pressure between the second floor in the governor's office and the third floor in the speaker's office? Or what's their relationship like today?
No, I don't think so. I don't know, but my guess is no. Despite the what you might call veiled references to Madigan's universe, that Pritzker made, it was still clear to mostly Republicans yesterday that he did not address the elephant in the room, Mike Madigan. And of course, Republicans have been on, beating the drum, especially in the last year and a half, as more problems arise in the speaker's universe in terms of sexual harassment or bullying by his chief of staff for 25 years, or now many of what we're seeing in criminal cases are Democrats, not necessarily, Madigan confidants, but although one of his confidants is apparently under investigation, Mike McLean, the lobbyist for ComEd, is apparently, media reports had him under a federal investigation. But Madigan, he's Teflon. He has been. He probably assumes that he will be. And that, the governor, he has seen governors come and go, and he has seen governors talk a lot tougher toward Madigan than than this governor has or is, and he's outlasted them.
And there is no guilt by association in criminal statute. He's always one layer removed, it seems, from the actual allegation or indictment, but just close enough to it. So it certainly raises some questions. That's a look at the ethics and the corruption and all that conversation in Springfield today. But when we come back, a closer look at what you might expect from the State of the State address and the reaction to it in terms of politics and debate and legislation in 2020. We're back in just a moment with more from our Reporters Roundtable.
Dear Winter, I've got all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, and style for miles. Let's hang. Toyota.
This week, Abigail Thomas took office as the first woman to be named chief of police in the history of our city. We need to get out in the community and make some noise.
I'm not sending people out to bust heads so some dinosaurs can feel good about themselves. We're going to defuse that bomb out there so everybody gets home safe. If I fail, it will be 20 years before they give another woman this job. How do I look?
You look like the chief of police.
Tommy, series premiere Thursday, 10/9 Central on CBS.
Join the WCIA3 sports team. Brett Behrens, Craig Choate, and Marley Weirda from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign Sports Desk for the best in local sports coverage in Central Illinois on WCIA3.
My fellow Americans, I stand before you today humbled because the President's Day Super Sale is on now at Denver Mattress. Right now, the more you buy, the more you save. Get $100 off every $1,000 you spend. And check out the Doctor's Choice Plush or Firm, only $599.99. Or save up to $200 on select Purple mattresses and accessory bundles. And for the budget-minded, get the Summit Queen, only $189.99. Plus 7 years, no interest financing. The President's Day Super Sale on now at Denver Mattress.
Are you ready?
Now show me what you got.
This February and March, watch every championship game live. The IHSA Basketball Championships play here
on X49.
WCIA3 honoring Black history with this moment in Hidden History.
The small Alabama community of Africatown was formed by enslaved Africans included in the last known illegal shipment of slaves to the U.S. Today, Africatown is listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
This moment in Hidden History is brought to you by the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
We're back now with John and Hannah on our Reporters Roundtable. Give us a preview of 2020 in your review and your coverage, reporting of the State of the State address, the reaction to it. What are we in for this year?
Well, governor's first years are always going to be easier. People are more willing to pitch in and get things done to make things run smoothly. Last year was a pretty heavy agenda we had. There was a huge amount of very heavy-hitting bills. Of course, marijuana legalization and the progressive income tax, constitutional amendment, and a bunch of other things, the Reproductive Health Act. And this year is probably going to be a little bit more difficult. I mean, you know, you already took all the candy off the table, you know, especially with the big infrastructure plan. Now it's kind of time for the governor and lawmakers to eat their vegetables. And that includes, you know, a budget that's definitely going to be a lot tougher than last year. Last year we had a $1.5 billion kind of windfall from income tax revenue that was unexpected. And that made things a lot easier. It might not happen again like that this year. You know, property taxes are still top of mind for so many Illinois homeowners. You know, that has to get addressed. The governor says he's committed to addressing that, but, you know, people differ, and we saw that property tax task force basically fall apart at the beginning of this month.
It was interesting to hear Hannah use that analogy of candy in year one, vegetables in year two. I think my mother would be upset about the order of those two, vegetables first. But John, I think that's fair analysis that Democrats in this Democratic majority and Governor Pritzker got those big sweeping headlines in year one. are things breaking a little bit more toward Republicans and what they want in year two, namely some of the financial things and a more restrained budget?
To the extent that they'll have to have a more restrained budget, I think that's true. But Pritzker, and you'll hear this from both Republicans and Democrats in the legislature, he really is an open door person. And Republicans say he really does listen to us. And Durkin Durkin is one of the more critical of the opposite party in this building. And for the most part, he praised the governor yesterday and thanked him for including their views in last year. Now, it's going to be tough for Democrats in terms of the big thing this year is getting voters to approve the constitutional amendment to change the income tax to a graduated rate income tax to hit the wealthier harder. And the governor, on top of that, they're going to have to focus on this budget that they still don't. They're going to get. Pritzker says they're going to get extra revenue if they change the income tax structure, but that wouldn't happen till next year if voters approve it. This year, voters will be looking at that budget, and it's going to be either way. If they have an easy budget, voters will say, "Well, why do we need to change it?" And if you don't have an easy budget, voters will say, "Well, they can't get their act together, so why should we change it?"
And in year one, let's not forget, the governor was prepared to make and felt pressured to make some pretty tough choices, namely about the teachers' pensions systems, but then was saved in the 11th hour by this extra windfall of new unfound revenue that they weren't expecting, largely because the national economy had this big boon, and they're like, wow, there's all this extra tax money. Can we catch lightning in a bottle twice? They may not be able to bank on that same good fortune in year two.
Right, exactly. And, not to mention, things are just a lot more difficult. The end of May, or beginning of June rather, when we all got out of here, it was a very happy time, but then flash forward a few months later, we saw Senator Tom Cullerton. He was indicted for allegedly ghost payrolling. And then about a month and a half later, we saw raids on Senator Sandoval's office and some other local officials up in Cook County. And then about a month later, we saw former State Rep Louis Arroyo arrested and then charged with bribery. And we also know that a state senator who still has not resigned was wearing a wire. And so we have just everything has changed, and the focus is on ethics. And Republicans especially are going to tie everything to ethics, and that includes the budget.
Right now they're lining up for Republicans to sort of seize on the politics of that. How might that change the optics and the reality in this building? That's next when we come back.
Trust WCIA3 for reliable local news. Connect with WCIA3 throughout the day, from the morning show, the news at noon, to the news at 5, 6, and 10 at night. The most accurate weather forecast and consistent coverage of local sports and your Illini Nation. With a legacy of local news for over 65 years. Trust WCIA3, your local news leader. Storm Tracker on WCIA3, sponsored by SK Exteriors. No matter what type of weather is coming, Chief Meteorologist Kevin Livey and his team are ready.
It's still snowing in areas.
We track every storm because no two storms are the same.
What are those roads like? But I'm on 74 right now.
And no two towns will feel the same impact.
Storms have been tracking into the...
We're always here. SK Exteriors Storm Tracker on WCIA3.
Are you ready?
Now show me what you got.
This February and March, watch every championship game live. The IHSA Basketball Championships played here
on X49.
WCIA3 honoring Black history with this moment in Hidden History.
The small Alabama community of Africatown was formed by enslaved Africans included in the last known illegal shipment of slaves to the U.S. Today, Africatown is listed on the National Register of Historic Places.
This moment in hidden history is brought to you by the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign.
Mark your calendar for the Lands Inc. WCIA3 Home and Garden Expo, Saturday and Sunday, February 22nd and 23rd at Lincoln Square in Urbana.
For clever home projects and fresh garden ideas, you can talk to experts and get ideas.
Stop by the WCIA3 booth and meet our on-air personalities.
Play the Prize Passport Sweepstakes. Collect all 6 stamps on the Prize Passport and you could win. The Lands Inc. WCIA3 Home and Garden Expo, February 22nd and 23rd at Lincoln Square in Urbana.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
We're back again with our Reporters Roundtable, John O'Connor and Hannah Meisel. Hannah, the reporter who broke this second leg in the Secretary of State's office. Can we call it a scandal here? There's this developing wave of blunders in the automatic voter registration system, and you found this newest part, that people under the age of 18 who are going to get signed up for their driver's licenses, presumably, were queued up, essentially, and sent over to be registered to vote. That was caught and blocked before it could all happen. What else do we know about how expansive this was?
Right. So at a Board of Elections special meeting this week, it was revealed to board members that in addition to the possibility of non-citizens, or at least those who self-identified as non-citizens, it could be that they just checked the wrong box of being registered to vote. There was also 4,700 16-year-olds who were blocked from completing that voter registration process when the information got to the Board of Elections from the Secretary of State. Now, they were never on voter rolls. And it's also legal for 17-year-olds to register to vote if they're going to vote in the primary, if they are going to be 18 by the general election.
So these were only 16-year-olds?
Yes.
17-year-olds could say, I can vote next time,
right,
so they can get ready to go, but the 16-year-olds were sort of queued up there. Was this also a 17-month problem? Do we know how long back or how far back it went?
We don't know yet. I wasn't told. It just seems that the Board of Elections just seemed to notice a lot more 16-year-olds who were coming through, and they were like, wait a minute, and so they had to back up and look, and then they just ended up sending out letters saying, you know, you were trying to register to vote, but, you know, we wouldn't complete your application because you are not old enough.
Were Dave Dahl here, he might quote the Breakfast Club at this point with the fake ID trying to vote. But, John, the primary election is just a little more than 40 days away. What's the sense of urgency about, we see Republicans calling to shut the program down. They're being very loud about that. Suspend it until we can fix it. What are the politics here, and are there any immediate solutions?
This is a tailor-made, quote-unquote, scandal for Republicans. This is exactly what, you know, if you asked Republicans, if you had the opportunity, if you could see this program go south, what would you like to see happen? And this is exactly what they'd like to see happen, because they can point out that this was done too quickly, and it's a way for Democrats to get more Democrats registered. I remember sitting in hearings with the Rauner administration, Bruce Rauner, the current governor's predecessor, a Republican, his staff explaining this. No, we need more time to get this implemented in all these different agencies that are going to be signing people up, and the Republicans and the Democrats who control the legislature. It was kind of meh, you know. It's almost like Nancy Pelosi saying we need to pass Obamacare to find out what's in it. You know, we'll take care of it. It'll work. You know, but
the Rauner administration
works like
warned about this specific thing. They said we're concerned that people may inadvertently or accidentally be signed up. People who should not legally be under current law allowed to vote.
Sure. And so, when the last segment we talked about what's going to happen in the legislature. Well, the primary election is one of the biggest issues to affect the legislature, and it's not even a legislative issue. We've got scandals and criminal action federal criminal action against several Democrats, and we've got the AVR problem. It looks like Democrats aren't really in control of things.
How much of that is also because they're cautious to criticize Jesse White, who is about as close to an untouchable political figure in this state as you can find? I mean, even on the ballot, voters, he's widely liked, he's widely supported. How much of that is because of who is involved more than what is involved?
I think that's a very good point. I mean, Jesse White has been around forever. He's very well respected, a former Cub. And so his office has been very defensive. The coalition that basically wrote the bill and pushed for it in 2016 and 2017 when it was ultimately signed, they've been very upset with Jesse White. And for at least the last year, they've been hinting at the fact that they would bring litigation, and this week they were they're very clear that litigation is basically looming.
Lawyers are salivating, even now, as they draw up those lawsuits. All right, interesting. So State of the State takeaways, if you had to put or paraphrase Governor Pritzker's State of the State in one word, how do you think Governor Pritzker sees the state of the state of Illinois?
You know, just like in his inaugural address last year, he understands that there's still a lot of problems that we need to address, but he reaffirmed his commitment to, you know, helping the state get back to a healthy place.
So stay with us throughout the week, and we will see how that goes. John and Hannah, thanks for joining us. We're back in just a moment.
Jim and Joanne are here to pick up the same prescription. They both know the system is not on their side. They both know drug costs are out of control. But one of them is taking back control with GoodRx. Next. So while he's paying that much, even with his insurance, she's paying this much just by using GoodRx. Use GoodRx to compare prices at pharmacies in your area and stop paying too much for your prescriptions. Download the free app today and take back control.
Congratulations to Griffin Andrich, Central A&M High School basketball standout, and WCIA3's Athlete of the Week. Nominate your favorite Athlete of the Week at WCIA.com. Sponsored by Loman Ray Insurance Group. WCIA3 honors Black History with a special presentation of Central Illinois Hidden History. Wednesday, February 19th at 6:30. Sponsored by the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign.
Full Court Friday.
Covering high school basketball.
With highlights of all the action. Join our team for Full Court Friday.
Friday night at 10 on WCIA3. Sponsored by Loman Ray Insurance and Illinois State University.
Share your morning with us and you could win.
Take a photo of your morning, post it to WCIA.com, and you could be seen on the morning show at 9 a.m.
Each Friday, 3 lucky viewers will win a coffee mug from WCIA3 and Carriage Crossing.
Morning Mug Club, sponsored by Carriage Crossing.
The cat's out of the bag now, Beth. Why am I hanging out with Beth and Howard Stern in a room full of cats?
Isn't this great? They're just hanging out.
Then, way to go! Nice job. Dr. Oz makes a house call.
Unfortunately, that's going to strip off more than a year of your life.
It's probably a good decade I'm down at this point. And takes a DNA test.
For the first time, I'll show you my results.
Plus, stew on this summer. Next, Rachel.
Monday at 3 on WCIA3.
Before we let you go, some sad news that affects people in our audience and the city where we taped this show here in Springfield. Frank and Cinda Edwards died in a plane crash Tuesday night, along with John Evans, who was also on board. Frank Edwards, the former mayor of Springfield, and Cinda Edwards, his wife, the county coroner here in Sangamon County. We talked to House Republicans Tim Butler and Mike Murphy, who both remembered the Edwards as two public servants who wanted nothing more than to make Springfield a better place for their neighbors to live.
You know, this is a real tragedy for Springfield, and I just talked to Cinda a few days ago. I was talking to her at an event about her job in the office and things like that, and to think that they're gone from us is just, you know, it's terrible. And
their entire life was dealt with serving the public, so the hole they leave is unbelievable. And I was just devastated because they were friends, but just the community, it's a great, great loss for the community.
And that does it for us here on Capital Connection. We hope you'll join us again at the same time next week. I'm Mark Maxwell.